And you're very welcome back to Carrick and Shannon. We are approaching now the last few speakers on day 2 of the BioFarm 2021 conference. And we're going to now turn, and it's all knitting in so beautifully. Tá sé fitte fuite, it's woven together. All the same themes seem to be echoing each other with each speaker. But we're now going to look at a new departure in Irish farming that happened a few years ago, Talamh Beo, that was really trying to bring forth all of the ideas that we've been talking about. So we're being joined by 2 members of the Talamh Beo, this new initiative, which most of you know about or you'll hear about very soon. The Fergal Anderson, market gardener from Galway, is first going to talk to us, and then Bridget Murphy, a regenerative hill farmer who is based in Sligo. So we'll go straight to Fergal.
Where do I look? Anywhere? Okay. Yeah, so thanks very much for the chance to present Talamh Beo a little bit here and talk, I suppose, about what we're trying to do with it, because it is a bit of a new departure. And I think, one of the basic things when we think about food and agriculture in Ireland, and often it's something I reflect on when I'm doing work myself, is that it's like we've been producing for somewhere else or someone else always throughout our history. And that, like, we have this colonial past, I think, where the land of Ireland was used to extract the resources to put somewhere else, to bring somewhere else. And we've kind of continued that on. And I don't know if we've ever really had a chance to look at our own food and farming systems and look at the land around us and ask, oh, what's the best use of this land for the land itself? And for the people and communities that live there. And I suppose that's a little bit where Talamh Beo has come out of, is that kind of idea that in order to make a change in the way things work at the moment, we're going to have to organize ourselves. And what we really need are farmers who are doing the work on the ground, farmers who can stand over that work and say, look, I have got an alternative here, I've got something that's functioning, that's working. And the things that we hear about at these conferences all the time and that we share between each other, which is a great thing. But I think I suppose Talamh Beo is also an attempt to go beyond that and to say we need to step from those rooted places in the soil where we're working with the land and working with people and working with community out into society and into the policy spaces where decisions are made which affect us all. And I think, farmers are about the ground underneath their feet, but we're also about the wider society that's around us. And if we're not engaging with that society, we're missing a trick, because ultimately much of the landscape that we see, much of the farming models that we see is shaped by forces that are far out of our control. They're not democratically run. They're focused almost entirely on agribusiness commodities rather than food for people. And we have to stand up and challenge that. And I think in Ireland, it's high time that we did so from the strong rooted places that is our fields and our farms. So I suppose what we want to bring are the kind of positive solutions. And the positive solutions, we're hearing more and more of them all the time, and the access to what's going on, the access in terms of information, in terms of sharing, has never been better. And I think people realize now how the agro-industrial system works. They're beginning to realize how agroecological systems work, where people are working with nature rather than against it. And I think it's never been clearer that there needs to be a real shift in how we produce food and how we treat the land and the landscape. And it's upon us to begin that process. And it's a responsibility that I think we have, not just to the landscape of the present, but also to future generations, because every year that goes by, we're just robbing from future generations. So Talamh Beo is a farmer-led organization. We're not alone. We're part of La Via Campesina, which is an international movement of farmers, and their European branch, which is the European Coordination Via Campesina. And what does that give us? Well, firstly, it gives us a sense that we're not alone on our island as an organization. When we organize amongst ourselves and talk to each other, we know that there's other farmers who are doing the same thing in other countries who are also organizing amongst themselves and are talking to each other about what they want. And I think that is a sense that we're part of an international movement, gives us, I suppose, it reinforces what we're doing here. It also gives us a seat at the table. So being part of the European Coordination Via Campesina means we can participate in events in Brussels, in the European Commission consultative groups on different issues. That means that for the first time, the Irish representatives who may have been there before in their comfortable positions with agro-industry or whoever it might be, are faced with an agroecological alternative, somebody who's talking about regenerative farming, somebody who's talking about how we can farm for land and people and community rather than for business and just for profit. So I think that's important that we begin to occupy those spaces and begin to stand there, like I said, well-rooted in our fields, talking about the positive alternatives that we can make. And one of the things that we talk about a lot in La Via Campesina and in Talamh Beo is this idea of food sovereignty. Now, people say, what does that mean? But I mean, people are familiar with economic sovereignty because I think when the IMF came to Ireland, there was a lot of discussion about economic sovereignty, and people understood that, you know, losing economic sovereignty was about losing the right to define your own economic systems. And food sovereignty is essentially about the same thing. It's about losing the right to define how your food and agricultural system works. And I don't know if we've ever had food sovereignty in Ireland because, as I said, it's always been external forces or agribusiness companies who seem to define how our food and agricultural systems work here. So it's an invitation for people to get involved in redefining those systems and a redemocratization of those systems. And it's not a term that's been invented by NGOs or by sort of in a book somewhere. It's a term that was invented by farmers to try and describe the situation that they felt they were in when the WTO was saying, we're going to have a global market for commodities and we're going to trade wherever we need to trade, and whatever happens, happens, and we don't care. And farmers all over the world turned around and said, well, hang on, you know, if that destroys my economic farming system here, it'll also destroy your farming system there. And I think people began to realize that kind of, that's how you call it, like a homogenization of production across the world was going to threaten the rural livelihoods everywhere. And I suppose the reaction to that is to say, well, no, we need to protect the kind of rural integrity of the rural environment and the integrity of rural farming systems and small-scale production systems wherever they may be. So I think for Ireland it's particularly appropriate because we're talking about, as I said, decisions being made somewhere else by somebody else, and instead we're saying we want to make those decisions for ourselves. It also means talking about healthy food for everyone. And I mean, there were some really good examples about what Cahill's talking about, that link into the community, about providing food into your community, and Jim mentioned it as well. That should be the first role of farming, is feeding people. That's what it's all about. So like when we get out of that and we get into producing a commodity that's just going to be on a global market or that's going to be processed and exported into another market, maybe destabilizing those markets as well for local producers there, that's not where we want to be. So food sovereignty is about food for people. I suppose it's about working with nature, and that's, again, another theme that has come up again and again here, and I've heard it from nearly all the speakers, working with natural cycles. And I mean, we should live in a country where you can drink water from every stream or river or ditch, and that's not the case. And the reason it's not the case is because we have a farming system which is extracting from our land and is leaving us to pick up the pieces. So food sovereignty is about trying to go beyond that system. It's about us taking a step back and saying, no, hang on, how did we get into this mess? And how are we going to get out of the mess? And I think the only way we can really do that is by organising as farmers, as I said, rooted in our field. So I'd encourage everyone to join Talamh Beo. If you're a farmer, it should be a good home for us, for you. And what we're trying to set up within that is spaces that farmers can talk to each other and say, okay, what are the issues here? What do we need in terms of policy to take this small action that I'm doing in my day-to-day farm the norm and not just an alternative? Because I think that's the step that we need to take. Given the challenges that we're facing at the moment, we need agroecology, regenerative farming. We need all of those things to become the norm and not just a sideline and something that they can pay lip service to. We want that to be at the centre of the discussions, and we want the farmers to be at the centre of those discussions too. So we're defining those policies. So I suppose, yeah, I mean, one of the examples that we'll give of what we're trying to do is that kind of farmer-led research, and Bridget's going to explain that in much greater detail with the EIP that we're currently running, a soil biodiversity project. But we'd love to do a lot more, and we can do more when we work together. And I think, I mean, there's a lot of different organisations in Ireland that are coming together, but Talamh Beo can be one of those ones that can maybe bring the farmers into a space where we really feel that we can, I think, articulate something into society, so it's not just about the soil. So I'll leave it there, and I'll let Bridget come in with her presentation, and we can maybe talk a bit more after.
Great, let's see if we can do this without glasses. So thank you for the opportunity to introduce our EIP. And for those who don't know, they are the European Innovation Partnership Projects. In a nutshell, a group of Talamh Beo farmers with a history of applied learning have come together well, applied with different agroecological kind of perspectives, have come together to learn about soil biodiversity and how to go about enhancing it on their farms. So earlier on in the year, we submitted a successful proposal entitled Talamh Beo's Soil Biodiversity Literacy and Enhancement Project, and that is a mouthful. We usually shorten it down, as Fergal mentioned, to the EIP, the Soil Biodiversity EIP, but I think it's really important to look at those two words, literacy and enhancement, because we've heard Jim speaking about it, we heard Carl speaking about it before, about the fact that learning and understanding and teaching is something that's quite integral to farmers. We're always learning on a daily basis, and we're passing and sharing that information on to each other. And 10, 15, however many thousand years of farmers doing that is what has brought us to where seeds are at the moment, where animal husbandry is at the moment, and where our knowledge base is at the moment. So that's quite an integral part of an agroecological process, is that learning component and sharing that learning on a peer-to-peer basis rather than external information coming in at us. The second part on the enhancement is that you take that learning, you take all of that knowledge and you act on it. There has to be action. Testing it out, running it, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work, and putting it into practice. So there's our long title, and in green, the ethos behind it, which is putting our feet back on healthy ground by growing the biodiversity in our soils. So the project is designed around agroecological principles, and it showcases our signature, which is operating from the ground up and leading by example. It's a collaboration between farmers, Talamh Beo, non-government organizations, including NOTS, the Leitrim Organic Farmers, and we would be also looking at drawing in local authorities and educational institutions especially. For example, schools, TY a year, your ag certs, your ag colleges, and your universities and spaces that are dealing with soil and soil biodiversity. So we're aiming to bring science closer to the citizens while addressing a major societal challenge of our time, and that is the loss of biodiversity. We're starting, once again, true to our signature, with the ground, with the soil, and it's our most valuable natural resource if you have to think about it. The day that the soil actually has no life left in it is the day that agriculture has no foundation. So the ethos that I'm describing here, let us show you what we as farmers can do. So often there is this perception that farmers are, and please forgive me if I'm insulting anybody here, there's absolutely no intention to do it, I'm just going to open my mouth and do it, where there's this perception often that farmers are just some sort of thick, ignorant person and they need to be taught all of this newfangled stuff. And we forget, as I said, and I mentioned Jim and I mentioned Cahill, that farmers are constantly learning. We're constantly kind of going out and testing stuff and finding new information. The other thing, of course, through the CAP, and especially down the western seaboard, with the low payments from 2004 till now, so many of our farmers had to go off and get a second job to actually be able to survive. But with that second job, or with their partners having off-farm jobs, has brought a huge amount of skills back into that pool. So now you might have farmers, but you also have office managers and farm advisors and planners and lawyers and whatever that are farming at the same time. And that skills base is going to lend itself to a very interesting perspective of what we can see a new generation farmer emerging out to be. But as I say, we found it quite interesting when we drew up the program, just the 8 people that are sitting on the operational group from Talamh Beo. We had everything from As I say, I mean, people with agricultural expertise. We've got an anthropologist. We have, what is Mimi? Sort of geology. I mean, there's just an incredible range of resources that are sitting there. The project is also going to be truly from the ground up. There's a lot of these locally led projects, but they're brought in kind of from an academic perspective, and then they're implemented on the ground. But we truly designed it through a design thinking approach. We've designed it, we've led it, and it's going to be implemented and managed by farmers. And as I say, this perhaps new generation farmer that's going to be part researcher, part citizen scientist, assessing the knowledge and implementing this project in real time. We aim to get farmers and citizens engaged in learning about the soil biodiversity and how to regenerate and restore a healthy soil food web. It's peer-to-peer learning, as I've mentioned. We'll be bringing in expertise where needed. We have soil scientists, we have planners and advisors on hand, but we'll broker them in and broker them out according to our needs, as opposed to them usually coming to us and brokering us in and out. And it's real-time research. The laboratory is going to be brought to the living lab, and the results are going to be made available to research partners and other agencies. We're rooting it in local areas, and as such, it seeks to bring the local actors and the local authorities in as stakeholders. So, for example, local county councillors, local environmental networks, local schools, local colleges, and such. We prefer to engage farmers, as I say, and to change their current practices, not by the carrot and stick programs that have characterized the CAP in the past, that prescribe and punish. We believe that getting farmers to engage from the love of their land and the desire to support the life and health of their soil will deliver better and quicker results. I'm mentioning last, but it's not least, gender mainstreaming is evident throughout Talamh Beo as an organization and the project. And I just wanted to note the difference between gender balance, although we have gender balance on our core group. We would have 6 men and 6 women. But I think it's important to note the difference between gender balance and gender mainstreaming, in the sense that obviously gender balance is just the number of the genders that are sitting at the table, but gender mainstreaming is what women bring to that table. And when you do not have women sitting at that table, so much is lost. And again, I'm just thinking of Cahill talking about his partner raising some ideas, and hey presto, a couple of days later, that might be his idea. But the point is, women bring knowledge, they bring experience, and they just bring a different perspective that has been missing at the table until now. So when we talk about gender mainstreaming, I think it's just important to kind of clarify that that's what we're talking about. So the description of the project activities, we've got 16 participating farms. As I said, 8 of us from Talamh Beo itself, leading by example. And we matched that with 8 people who are not part of Talamh Beo and are quite happy to join it. As I said, male and female farmers across the board. There's an education component that each of the farmers will be doing, and they'll be applying what they learn in real time on test plots on their land. So 2 courses, Nicole Masters' Integrity Soils program, and Elaine Ingham's Soil Food Web, the Launch Your Own Lab, are the 2 options that farmers are going to be choosing from. And they will be choosing different test plots on their land. Now, the test plots are going to be quite interesting because, as you can see in green, it covers a range of ecosystems and soil types and conditions. Some farms have been or are in traditional best practice, or conventional best practice rather. Some, for example, like my own sheep farm, might be overgrazed. And then you would have people who are converting perhaps either to organic or permaculture or regenerative farming. And then we might have some of the farms that are 15, 20 years into that process. So we know that we won't be able to show a huge amount in the soil biodiversity in 1 year, but what we can do is have a look at how it's different in different places, on different soils, and that just starts off that ball rolling on the learning curve. There's going to be different land use practices. So some of the people are doing horticulture, some tillage, some pasture grazing, woodland, agroforestry, hill sheep farming like myself. And then it would be across different water catchment areas. So we get a good geographic spread around the country. We chose to go with the water catchments actually instead of going with counties, because when you speak to a farmer and a farmer goes, "Oh, you from Tipperary," or you kind of like this side of the Shannon, it raises a whole lot of baggage. But if we took it from the perspective of a water catchment, where does your farm fit in the water catchment? It forces people to look at their land a little bit differently. It forces them to look at it from that nature point of view rather than from a construct point of view. The last part of the project would be, as I say, that there's a hub of expertise and resources. I actually missed out the fact that we're going to be looking at technical innovations and physical innovations. The technical innovations being things like micronutrient meters or your bricks refractometers or even the microscopes that people are going to be doing the biological kind of studies under. And then your physical innovations, for example, your soil biological activators, your mineral amendments, biochar, green manure, compost teas, inoculants. We're going to be kind of like exploring those and trialing them in real time and documenting the farmer's experience as they kind of go through either generating it or putting it out. And there's going to be a series of 10 knowledge transfer meetings where the farmers will all come together and discuss their experiences. I do want to say, I mean, in the world of CAP and in the world of the department, they're knowledge transfer. But we would want to acknowledge that it's way more like a knowledge exchange rather than a knowledge transfer. But lastly, as I said, the hub of expertise and resources, including the soil scientist and farm advisor, being available to the participating farms and the operational group being able to be brokered in and out as we need them. So each of the participating farmers will engage and complete the education component of the project. They'll engage and assist with the baseline surveys and the testing and the applications of the innovations that I was talking about. They will engage in the knowledge transfer groups where we would be looking at that peer-to-peer learning coming to the fore. Each farm will be delivering a farm walk, and each of the participants will engage with the project design and management as it unfolds, the aim of which is to have this truly locally led project. The one thing I haven't actually spoken about is that we are designing a digital platform. Especially with COVID, it's been difficult to kind of get everybody to the farms, so we're going to bring the farms to the people. For people who aren't able to come and physically go on a farm walk and have a look, we'll be blogging it in real time over the growing season next year. So keep an eye out for Talamh Beo. Find us on the internet. Our website should be up and running, I'd say, from that first working week in January. And basically, hopefully what we're wanting to do is bring a whole bunch of farmers along on the adventure of watching these 16 farms going through this process. The outcomes then leaving the participating farmers with an advanced knowledge of their soil biodiversity and how to enhance it. And in the terminology again of CAP and Brussels and that being called lighthouse farmers, will provide a resource to farms in the local area. Leaving farmers and citizens who have followed the project, again, with that clear idea about how to go about enhancing and improving their soil biodiversity, and contributing a resource for educational institutions and research groups to use and build on. So in a nutshell, that's pretty much the project. It's really exciting. We've just had our first KT meeting where we got introduced to each other, and yeah, as I say, we'll be kind of going live mid-January, so keep an eye out for us. It'll be great to have people following it. Thank you.
So I think we can go straight into questions. Yeah, Bridget, if you come, because it's such a big issue, both what Talamh Beo is and then this particular project about growing the biodiversity of our soils. The first thing, I'm just struck, there's such a disconnect. Like yesterday, Jack Nolan from the department, Jack Nolan was his name, from the department, was saying, he was reminding us about that, how 85% of the nitrogen in water is from farmers, and how the National Parks and Wildlife have showed about this biodiversity tragedy, this travesty that's happening. Again, he put it down to his department and the farmers that are under him. And then he talked about the hedgerows being stripped back. And today, the farmers we're talking to, particularly the people who are gathered in Talamh Beo, it's almost they're a different species of humanity. Like there's a big leap, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, we all see that issue, I think. I mean, it's clear as day, like I was saying, and I don't know, for us to try and bridge that is a challenge. But the first thing we need to do is to get organised and vocalise it, I think, because I mean, if we're not articulating that into the broader farming community and not articulating positive alternatives into society in general, I mean, we're not really fulfilling the role that we think we need to fulfil. And what I see at the moment is a bit of a dearth of leadership, actually, from farming organisations, because change is coming. And, there's a reckoning coming for the industrial farming model. And they're really doing a disservice to their members by not engaging with this and saying, okay, well, what can we do? How can we positively contribute to the situation, as opposed to being reactionary and conflictive? And I think we don't want to get into that kind of situation. And what we do want to do is say, look, we've actually got the alternatives. Isn't society lucky that there's all these farmers out here who are demonstrating that there's things that we can do tomorrow if we want to? All we need is the enabling environment for it. And I mean, one of the things that we've been working on is that local food policy framework. And I didn't mention that there, but I mean, that was a sense that there was a group of us who sat down, we're all involved in direct selling or short supply chains. And we said, well, what are the barriers to getting more people involved? How can we get more people working the land? How can we get more produce onto people's plates? And there's issues around finance, there's issues around labour, there's issues around fair incomes. All of those things can be resolved. I mean, today, we were just talking about this earlier, they just announced 70 million euros for investments into dairy and beef processing plants, for infrastructure, right? So 70 million euros is popped out of the pocket to say, okay, Dairy Gold needs they need to pivot to making brie for the French market, or whatever it might be. There's money there for that. But there's no money to say, okay, we're going to support local markets. We're going to support getting quality food onto people's plates in every household in the country. So that's a scandal. It's the scandal of our time. So if we're not up there as farmers calling it out, I think we're not doing our job. So I see that as part of our work as well.
And I think there's a bit of a follow-on here as well, I mean, if we look back to the 1950s, because one of the things that we are so clear about, obviously, is chemical fertilizer and the damage that it's done. But, there was a time when convenience food, agriculture modernized. There was suddenly this chemical fertilizer to throw out, and best practice changed. Best practice was to throw it all out. And now we're kind of realizing, oh, okay, wait, hold on a moment. There was a huge cost to that best practice. And it's very, very difficult for the people who are, both the businesses that are making a living off of that, I mean, they're stuck in a cycle where they need that to continue. And the farmers who have been doing it for the last 20 or 30 years are now being told that what they've done for the last 30 years has been incredibly damaging. And it's very, very difficult for them to make that transition out. So, I mean, Cathal, I hope you don't mind me kind of keep coming back to you, but I mean, on one level, saying straight away that you're not engaging in the supports has allowed you to look beyond them. But so many of us farmers are on a single farm payment. We tied to the rules and regulations that exist. I mean, I would love to kind of lower my sheep numbers and literally, if I'm looking, say, at the multi-species swords that we're talking about, where are the seeds coming from? Those seeds are coming from Germany. I mean, there's a massive market to open up here and grow our own seeds, local seeds. I mean, and when I'm talking not just Irish seeds, I'm talking about local to the northwest, local to the southeast, local to, but those opportunities aren't there. You know what I mean? Because that market is already kind of somewhere else. So I think it's about best practice. I think we locked into best practice, and the best practice hasn't been best, and there's a transition that needs to happen. There are farmers that are moving beyond that, and Talamh Beo, I think, is out in the front of that.
Well, John and Fergal look like they want to come in. But
yeah, well, I just want to make a comment going back to, again, how you address a problem in terms of, say, pollution. And I mean, we have a situation now, not a million miles from you near Kells, where, you know, there's a river polluted, and suddenly it's all hands. We have Chagaskin, we have Lakeland saying, oh, look, we have to do something about this. So they go out to each farm, they analyse the farm and say, you need to put in more tanks, keep those animals back from the river. And of course, the elephant in the room is there's too many cows, too much livestock, too much diffuse pollution that can't be controlled by putting in more tanks and simply fencing off rivers. So you have a solution which will in no way improve the situation, but will benefit agribusiness because there'll be more tanks to be sold, more fencing and so on. So you have to look at it. I think I can compare this to the whole way that Zach Bush presented yesterday. The illness business worth 3.8 billion. That has to be supported. What has to be supported here with Irish agriculture is agribusiness. Forget about it. There is no culture, nothing. That's what it is. And what Talamh Beo, I believe, is trying to do is trying to say, hold on again, this is about the farmers taking back ownership. That we'll start to drive, and Bridgie made a very good point, that in this project, this is a project that's owned by the farmers. And now we'll contract in the people that we want. It won't be prescriptive by somebody with the clord of saying, this is how you do it. So am I right in saying this is the way we want to work? And I mean, if I was to throw it back to you there, Fergal, you know, how can we then take where we are at the moment and try and get to the next stage? Okay, we have this soils project, but are there other things we can do to reach out to farmers who are out there saying, well, the current paradigm is not working, and get them on board?
Yeah, I mean, we talked earlier, and a couple of the speakers mentioned culture, and I think culture is a big thing, because we know it's not something you can change overnight. And like, I mean, when we're building, I mean, I mentioned it earlier, our history, and I think our history has done us a disservice in great respect. If you look at some of the European countries which had a long history of like, say, mountain farming and peasant farming in the mountains, where they would have had a kind of tradition of self-sufficiency and a tradition of kind of, you know, looking after the land, because it was generations and generations of cycles. There's always been this kind of like panic around the land in Ireland because we didn't have it, and then I think an exploitation of it when we did get it, and we didn't really develop that culture, that long-term culture of care that goes deeper, that goes into those seed production, that goes into like the small-scale processing in local areas and things like that. And I suppose we've bought into that model of kind of, you know, we're going to compete in the global markets with our mass-produced beef and our mass-produced dairy, and we've forgotten. And I mean, it came up earlier again, the issue about scale, but there's so much can be done at a small scale. That's where you start, and if we can, I think, reignite a little bit of that in local communities through those watersheds, because the watershed is the most logical. You know, it's our shared resource. It's what we're all. That's what, you know. That's what we all share. That's where we need to start. So I mean, I'm looking forward to going back, and I think, as we try and build the membership, and I hope all farmers, our website is open, you can go and join right now if you're watching this. But what we hope to do is have meetings in each of those watersheds, in each of those watershed areas, and if we have 10 farmers at each of those meetings, and they start a conversation, that's how we're going to do it. That's how we'll change the culture. And I mean, farmers talk to farmers, and I think it changes your life, it changes your perspective on the world farming the land. I don't know any farmer that I don't identify with on that level. You can tell if someone has done that work and has spent that time and had that connection. And I think you're more able to speak to those people. And they're the best at listening. I mean, I will listen to another farmer more than I listen to somebody with a clard of. And I think that works for all farmers. So like, that's the space to learn. And all I'm saying is we need to go beyond that kind of the farm walk and into the farm talk, maybe, or the farm society, get into the conversation about how our society is working and where it's going, and build that culture. And it'll take 50 years, it'll take 100 years maybe to change that, but that's a blink of the eye. Do you know what I mean, in terms of ecological terms? Well, maybe not in ecological terms, geological terms.
And the real power of Talamh Beo is, although it's a small organisation, it's linked to Via Campesina. It's linked to a pan-European peasant group who have said, international group of small-scale farmers who've been holistic, who've been regenerative, and they can teach us. That point you made in your summary, where we might never have had food sovereignty, at least not since the 12th century. We've always been, just haven't had that freedom until now.
I think that's the truth, and I think maybe there's an awful lot of knowledge that's been lost in Ireland, I have the impression. I mean, it's been lost at various points in our history, and even most recently probably with that modernisation process where, I mean, the indigenous communities in Latin America have that deep knowledge and that deep connection to their place and the knowledge that's there. But we're a long way off that, and I think, the knowledge now is how to operate the spreader or operate and that's not the knowledge that we need to go forward. So we're also searching for that knowledge or finding it in other places and applying it to the Irish context, because not every model or regenerative system or model of farming will work in every farm. It's about the diversity and finding what works in your place and applying it and learning from it. And that's the farmer-centered learning thing, I think, is key, because we were starting the Farming for Nature Awards a couple of weeks ago, and that was one thing that came up repeatedly, was that there's kind of there hasn't been, they're not getting that kind of from Teagasc or from the state agencies, that those new ideas aren't coming from there. They're coming from when farmers look around and say, hang on a minute, I have to do something different here, because this is not the same as it was even when I was a kid, and it's going backwards. So it's great when farmers wake up and realize that, but we also have to kind of look beyond and go, okay, how can we get things happening quicker? And that's I suppose what we're trying to do with the policy stuff.
And that's what we've heard from Clive, from Cathal, from Jim, is this idea of deep observation, and that's the heart of your growing of biodiversity in our soil, isn't it? Observing. So what, it's a 1 year or 2 year program? Is it?
It's a 1 year.
1 year, yeah.
Yeah.
And starting in January, or started before? No.
Well, we've already started, but what we're going to do is the live streaming will run from the growing season next year. So we'll start it out in about perhaps between mid-January, mid-February, and introduce people to the learning section. And then when the soil temperatures get to sort of 4, 5, 6, 7 degrees and you start getting biological activity, that's when we'll go to ground and start kind of doing the implementation.
The results in October for the public to see.
So we'll run it all the way through then till October.
Brilliant. Bridget Murphy, Fergal Anderson, thank you so much. So we're going to... We're going to just take a very short commercial break and then come back with Jim McAdam on agroforestry in about 5 minutes.